Thank you, Nate, and welcome to the hardcore here. So, I mean, part of the reason I was a little confused when Nate asked me was I'm actually a vertebrate morphologist and paleontologist and a biomechanics person, and I spent my whole academic career at the University of Utah and a few other places too, working using engineering design to understand how animals are built and how they work, and then extrapolating that to how they evolve. But ants are sort of like a different thing. They're like totally out of my world in general. So I don't pretend to be an ant expert, but I do know something about harvester ants, and they've been a fixation of mine since I was 7 years old. I was born and raised in Sacramento, California, and we lived in the city, and when I was 7, we moved to the outskirts of town, sort of semi-rural, and I saw what I still claim to be the first wild animals in my life when we got out there, and it was harvester ants. And I'd been used to looking at these little black ants in town, in the cracks that are in every town and so forth, and they're not very wild. But harvester ants I thought were cool, but I did not understand at the time, since I was 7, and an aspiring biologist, not a real one. I thought all ants ate insects. So every day I would carry like a freshly killed grasshopper out to this harvester ant colony, and they will eat those things, but I'm sure that after a while they were thinking, Jesus, here he comes again. We're like at risk of protein overload, because what they really are harvester ants, and their main food is seeds, mostly of grasses and other plants. So I got fixated on that, and then when we bought some property, and started visiting it outside of Escalante, right at the north portion of that central unit, the Caparowitz unit. We have harvester ants on that, and so I'm retired and I have time to play, and so I've been playing around with and observing harvester ants for about the last 30 years or so. So I'll tell you a little bit about what's known officially about harvester ants from the literature and the people I know. I should also say that I do know something about ants because I had 2 or 3 friends and colleagues at the University of Utah who are world-class ant people. So some of that might have rubbed off on me a little bit. Anyway, so first slide. And what I want to do is sort of meld my observations on our own property with what's known officially from the real ant biologists about a really interesting ant, the western harvester ant. And the reason why that's appropriate for this particular group is because if you want to show your clients ants anywhere on the monument, the chances are it's going to be this ant. It is all over the monument. It's the dominant ant. And in my view, and I'll try to convince you, it's actually the most interesting of all the harvester ants in North America. So our property is on the north slope of Canaan Peak, which is it's the high point of the Caparowitz. And it's the old Alvey homestead up here. And this little bit right here shows you the distribution of ants, just marked and so forth on that portion of the thing. And what I really want to emphasize here, so the official name is Pogonomyrmex occidentalis. The people who work on these things call them pogos. But this is the highest population of this ant that's ever been studied long term. So here's 6,200, 6,300 feet is what you generally see in the literature for the uppermost range of this ant in the western United States generally. On the Colorado Plateau, they go higher, and so it's about there. And this is ours. And then in this watershed, actually, I'm not going to talk about them, we have some of the highest colonies that have ever been recorded. So what I'm really saying here is we have a population of harvester ants that are up against their sort of physiological and ecological limits.
Are those the highest ever recorded? Are those on the table cliffs? Are they right there next to you, or are they further out?
No, they're up in South Hollow.
Oh, okay.
They're right up in here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not very far off the road, actually. Yeah, way up there. Okay, next. So I'm also, like Jackie earlier, I'm also an evolutionary biologist. So evolution is, for me, a useful way to look at things. But just want to cover a quick, just some simple background. And my hope is that you'll, one, find harvester ants interesting, and two, that you'll take advantage and actually, the fact that you're going to be out there with them all the time, take a few minutes to take some of your clients up and talk to them about them, right? So anyway, there are some fossil ones. We know they go back at least this far in North America. But the harvester ants are actually a relatively primitive ant. All ants come from a wasp-like ancestor, and so most ants are sort of like this. But a couple of key things here. One is that these colonies have only one queen. And she doesn't look very different from the workers, just a little larger. And they don't have like warriors or soldiers or anything else. All the workers look pretty much the same. And the foragers go out all by themselves. And we'll talk about that more later on, rather than in groups. And then finally, they retain the primitive sting system of wasps rather than chemical sprays. Next. Basic life cycle. And this is a great source of frustration to me. So one afternoon a year, for mature colonies, they will send out a cloud of winged reproductives, virgin queens and males. And that happens on only one afternoon in late July or early August. And it's triggered always by a monsoon downpour. And it's right after that. And my frustration is that in 33 years, I've never managed to be there. I have been on the doorstep of it so many times. So the workers are in control. And normally inside the mound are all these horny queens, would-be queens and males waiting to take off and go to these orgy stations. And they have to rely on the workers to tell them when to go. And so you can see the dark clouds forming, the humidity goes up, there's thunder, and all of a sudden these winged reproductives start coming out on the mound, and the workers are like trying to herd cats. They know it's not right, and they keep driving them back in, right? And I've been there so many times, and I've had to leave, and I've come back the next morning, and I can see it happened already. But it's a spectacular thing, because there are just thousands of these winged reproductives, and every colony, could be hundreds in the area, they're all synchronized. They're all synchronized. Whoa. Yeah, so somehow or other they all know that this is the time, and again, they don't have the internet or anything, they just know, because it makes no sense for a couple of colonies just to send them out. They have to do this in a big way, so they're all synchronized, yeah. So anyway, she mates with multiple males. The mortality rate in the first 24 hours on these newly mated queens is about 98, 99%. And then she finds a nest site. What they look for is bare ground without vegetation, if they can. She digs a little hole, seals herself in, and that is the last time, if things go right, that she will ever see sunlight again. She may live decades. We'll talk about that later on. She'll never see the sun again. That's it. So she breaks down, so her wings fall off straight away. She uses the flight muscles. She metabolizes them, plus fat stores, to feed her first group of larvae, take them to the pupae. They hatch out. They begin foraging, bringing food back, seeds mostly. And then, if things go well, the colony develops, It grows a workforce. Those early workforces are a few hundred individuals, maybe not even that. The biggest colonies of this species are up to 20,000 workers, but 5,000 or 6,000 is more normal. And then if they last to year 5, and again, almost all these colonies die. A small percentage make it here, and then you're back in the cycle again, right? All right, next slide. So just to show you, they do look wasp-like. Yeah, very wasp-like. So that's the male and the virgin queen. There's mating going on. And one important thing that's been discovered in recent years is they knew for a long time that they met with multiple males. But the more males that they meet with, the more likely the colony will succeed in the long run. So more males is better. And then here is a worker. And what I wanted to point out is, since these guys dig a lot and carry seeds, they have these hairs, very distinctive for these harvester ants. That's a little basket that they carry things in. Okay, next. Yeah.
Just how many, what is the number of males at the time of flight to the number of?
I mean, what's the ratio?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know exactly. It's not, I think that there are more males than there are females, and the males form a lek. So they go to a high spot, and they get together, and chemically probably they signal the queens, the virgin queens, and they go there, and then they just have a big roll around, right? Right. And so yeah, I think there are more males than there are females. The males have no purpose whatsoever. They die within a day or so, regardless. They're just programmed to die. They're sex machines, and that's all there is. Yeah.
That was my question. What happens to the males after?
Yeah, they're useless.
Okay.
Yeah. They actually develop from unfertilized eggs. Yeah. All workers are females. They're all daughters of the queen, but they are either sisters or half-sisters, depending upon who the father was. So the queen stores all the sperm and then doles it out, and anytime she wants a worker, she fertilizes an egg. And it could be from this male or that male, and so you have both true sisters and half-sisters in the workforce. Next slide. So the reason I like this ant in part, beyond the fact that it's on my property, right, is that I'd argue it's the most successful of all the harvester ants, period. Certainly in North America, there are about 30 species. This is its range, the green there, and these are all various localities. It goes farther north than any other harvester ant. It goes into southern Canada, and it has a closely related species here that I won't say very much about, but it has exactly identical nests design that we'll talk about. And when you get to the south and to where it's hot, much hotter, it's restricted to alpine. Well, not truly alpine, but certainly mountain sites. So it gets up high. It doesn't like a lot of heat, actually. Next slide. So here is the key innovation. And I mean, you take it for granted because around here, the only harvester ants you see look like this. But the fact of the matter is, there are probably 100 species of harvester ants in the New World, and this is it. This is the only one that does this, except for this little one, Selinus, that lives in the sagebrush steppe. It's the dominant thing north in the sagebrush steppe. But here it is. There's a mound. There's a cleared area that's usually called the disc in the literature, but I hate that term, so I call it the cleared zone. And this thing's covered with gravel normally. And here's the gravel off of one of these things, and there's the size of the worker. And so ants are, of course, famously strong for their size, but these are boulders, basically. And the weird part is they never help one another. So even these big guys here are dragged in by a single worker. The only thing I've ever seen them team up on is if you have a grasshopper and you throw it down or something like that. They will get together on that, but no, they work alone. All right, next slide. So what's the colony, that dome, look like? So it's the above ground part. All the other harvester ants don't have anything above ground. This is it for these guys. So they have granaries in here, little chambers where they stick all the seeds and so forth. And they have brood chambers where they raise their larvae and the new workers. And then it goes down. It could go down 4 to 6 feet in the ground with not usually brood chambers, but other sorts of things. And what I want to show you is, well, because I want to play scientist, really, right? So I measure. I want to find out how these suckers work, right? So I'm going to show you some data from temperatures that I've taken in the field. So it's air temperature on the surface here, the south surface, core temperature, and then soil temperature off here on a site nearby which has not been developed by ants. Just make a comparison. All right, next. And there you have it. So here's the red is core temperature. Here's air temperature. And what you can see is in fact, the core temperatures peak out close to what air temperatures are. But the most important part is they avoid all these nighttime lows. They get away from that entirely. You can instrument these things with care. So you have to do it during the cold season when they're way down on the ground, or else you have to do it in the middle of the night when they're I should have said this, they're entirely not diurnal. They go to bed at night. And then here's a little closer view. So surface temperatures on these things are incredible. 180 degrees on the south side. This little dashed line here is the physiological limit. So this tells you something to look for. When you're out in the middle of the day on the monument looking at an anthill, you'll see no ants because they're basically in siesta right there, waiting for the temperature to drop back down within workable limits. And the interesting thing is that the insulation in those things is so good that you have this sort of phase shift. So the peak is here, but it's here. And at the hottest part of the day, it's almost the coolest inside. So the ants actually don't have to go way down on the ground. They just have to duck inside. This temperature gradient here of about 90 degrees Fahrenheit, it's only over 6 inches. The rate at which so this heats up on the surface and it moves to the inside, but it moves at about ½ an inch an hour. They have fantastic insulation in these things. Anyway, it works to their advantage, and they sit right inside, and they would normally stay there, but it allows them, if a cloud comes over, they take advantage of it, and you will watch them. The cloud comes over, temperature cools a little bit on the surface, and they start sticking their heads out, and then they start shooting out across that cleared zone to get to vegetation before the cloud disappears and they get fried. And you can actually take a piece of paper or a cardboard or anything that will cast a shadow, and you can go up, and you can try this yourself. Just find a hole. We'll talk about that. They're entrance holes, usually only one. Put the card over it and just shade it. And within about a minute or two, the heads will start to pop out, right? And they'll start to run all the way around the part that's shaded until they hit the hot part, and then they come back in, right? It's really fun to do. So the other point I want to make is these guys are the most heliophilic insects you're going to find. They need sun. They just love it. Next. So, how important is this dome? Well, it's where most of the nurseries, the workforce is everything to the colony, and they have to raise them in here. So what I've really done is take the data about the range that's acceptable for developing larvae and pupae, and taken it over the same 2 different places, one in the colony here and one outside, nearby, same soil, everything else, down at a depth of about 10 inches, which is where most harvester ants would have brood chambers. And if you look at the number of days that actually fall, right, in the acceptable category. It's huge. And if you actually integrate the area under each one of these days and look at the hours, there's like no comparison at all. I mean, this is an incubation chamber. And it's a key to their success in northern or higher elevation situations. All right, next. So the workers live sheltered lives, but they don't live very long. 6 months to a year, just depends on what time of year they're born. But they start inside, and they have house duties. And so they're only allowed to tend the queen and to carry the eggs and the larvae around, but they're not allowed outside. And their skeletons are not fully formed. They're not fully hardened at that point. Then they graduate, and this is the risk of death. They graduate, and they're allowed to work outside, but only inside that cleared zone on the mound, not outside of that. And they tend things, they help arrange things on the mound and so forth. And then finally, when they're old ladies, they're allowed to go foraging. And there they are, and it might last only 2 or 3 weeks out of their whole life. They're allowed to be foragers, but it's by far and away the most dangerous part of life. And the theory is, well, two. One is we know ants actually gain experience, and it modifies their behavior. So these are the most experienced ladies in the colony. But the other is they're the most expendable, because they've only got a few weeks to live, right? So it depends on how you want to look at it, right? One of those views is sort of cynical, but they're the ones who actually do the foraging, and they're the ones who actually get picked off at the highest rates. All right, next. So we were talking about entrances. Look for it on the east side. They're always on the east. I said, they're heliophilic. They love the sun. They don't give a shit about sunset. It's the morning sun that they're really after. It's to the east, right? They care about the sun coming up to the east. Why? Well, you know, there could be a lot of reasons, but there's one basic one, right? And that is that you saw how the temperatures rise. They basically have to get going in the morning. They need, in order to actually get in a good day's work, they may be able to get back out in the afternoon some, but it's that morning thing that's the best for them. So here's sort of the distribution. And I'll have to say, in 30 years or so, I have never, ever found one on the west. So what it says to me also is kind of a little sidelight, that if it was a really cloudy day and there were no trees and you were out there, and that's possible out in some of these places, to look for moss on the north side, you can actually get a course compass direction from these colonies by looking at the entrance, because that is east, right? That's east. Just remember that. That's east, right? Yeah. Show that to your clients. They'll roll their eyes, right? But it's true. It's reliable. All right, next. So fires. We all know that fire suppression has been a really huge problem for forest management and so forth. It's also a big problem for harvester ants. So what happens is that there's an increased nutrient zone right around the outside of that cleared zone. And so here, a burned area, unburned area. And you can see on these ones that have been unburned for a long time, all those sagebrush coming up, they shade the colony. And so that's a problem for the ants, but they cannot do anything about it. Once a sagebrush gets to a reasonably small size, and it's outside the edge of that cleared zone, the rules are we don't mess with it. And then it grows up. Sagebrush is not the worst problem. It's pinyon pine. So pinyon pine use sagebrush as a nurse shrub. And so I didn't bring the pictures of them, but there are some really healthy old colonies that you can see their death coming because there's young pinyon pine coming up on the south side, and they won't be able to do anything about it. And if they live long enough and that tree stays there, it will kill them. Yeah. Also, these colonies cannot expand. They can't get rid of those things. They can't expand the colony size until something removes the barrier. Okay, next. There's been a lot of debate about what this big cleared zone means. The ants actually create it and they maintain it. It certainly increases sunlight to the whole area there. It deters predators. And the reason is for twofold. One, if these are only diurnal ants, so their predators are going to be out at daytime. It's too damn hot to get out there, right? And the other is the predators themselves are exposed to their own predators if they get out in an area like that that's completely barren, right? Harvester ants need a certain level of soil moisture to be healthy, and plants conceivably compete for that moisture. And then it also reduces the energetic cost of foraging because at least in this part, they can run really fast and straight. If there were plants growing up here like there are in other harvester ants, they have to zigzag around, slows things down, longer course of travel and so forth. Yeah.
Is there a consistent humidity that has to be inside the fruiting chamber?
Is there
like an ideal humidity state?
I don't know what it is, right? I'll just have to say, right, that if I were a better ant person, I'd be able to tell you. People have, I haven't. Yeah. They've taken moisture probes and put them down. It varies a lot, but I don't know exactly what it is. Yeah, I do know if it gets too dry, it's a problem for them. Yeah. Next. So let's just talk a little bit about ecological value. They support biodiversity, and the way they do that is if you have all kinds of plants growing around here and some become dominant, they will home in on the plants that are producing most seeds. And I should say that also these harvester ants do not climb. They don't actually pluck things out of plants. They have to fall to the ground. So they only pick up stuff on the ground, and they also do not dig for seeds. So if a seed gets covered up in any way, they will never know it. They won't go after it. So they basically home in and tamp down any plant that is starting to get dominant by selectively grabbing more of its seeds, if that makes sense to you. There are also a number of uncommon plants and even invertebrates that are associated with these little islands that they create. Some of them are like beetles, and some of them are like isopods that live underground, and they're commensals, basically. And they found some way to convince the ants to let them live there, right, without attacking them. They're also, the workers are certainly food for a lot of things. And in drought years, they are a major source, the colony is a major source of food for rodents. So you will see them in the hot part of the summer, if it's really dry. You'll see holes, 2 or 3 holes in the morning that weren't there the previous day. So at night, it's mostly deer mice and so forth, and come out and they dig in. They can smell the granaries, and they dig in and they get the seeds out. And then I mentioned before, for reasons that I don't understand, I don't think is fully understood, there's a ring of enhanced nutrition for plants and so forth around the outside of that CZ. And you can see all on that aerial view I showed, all the plants gathered around that, the shrubs. That's because it's basically a great place to live. And one thing that makes it great is not just the nutrients, but more water. Because half of that area is not, they have no plant competition, right? Also, the ants modify the soil, so those cleared zones actually allow a lot more infiltration of water. So when a monsoon rain comes, they're like gutters or something that just pour down in there, right? Yeah. No, they're great. I told you, they're great ants. Ecological threats. Well, there have been programs against prairie dogs. And there have been programs against harvester ants, and it's all for the very same reason. Oh, look at all that bare ground. It could have grass on it. Let's get rid of them. No, really, honestly. And most of the studies have shown that because of that enhanced growth area around the edge, it more than offsets what's lost, right? So, but that won't convince some people anyway. Where they can be a real problem is if you have a fire or something and you try to reseed by broadcasting seed out. They love that shit. They do. They're right on it. You know? So that's a negative, right? That's a genuine negative, right? All right, next. All right, just a little bit on predators. So this is a specialist on harvester ants. That's almost its entire diet is harvester ants. They don't go in here for the reasons I just told you, right? Too hot, too exposed. So they sit on the little trail. So when you're out there, if you can actually find game trails or other kinds of trails, sometimes even just 2 tracks, the ants actually follow those things. It's easier for them to get out farther, more energetically efficient, but the horned lizards know that. And they sit right alongside, and they just pick them off when they go by, right? And they have a mouth and an esophagus that's all lined by special tissue to keep them from being really hurt by the stings because they eat them live.
Wow.
Yeah, so they're getting stung all the time.
And isn't there an issue with horned lizards in Texas and stuff because they try to get fire ants and they get poisoned?
You know, I don't know how that works out for them. I mean, the fire ants are really, really problematic. And they have wiped out a lot of lizards and other ants. And there are certainly horned lizards in Texas, for sure, right? Is it Texas A&M or whatever it is, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know, actually. It's a good question, right? But certainly, I mean, their natural prey are these harvester ants, native harvester ants. And they're not bothered by them. They just scarf them up. You have spiders here that don't create webs, but they hunt. They get those old queens that are out foraging, and then this guy, these little pit traps, and that's pretty scary at the bottom, actually. Right? Yeah. And then flickers are interesting because they do, in fact, come out here, and they peck holes in the mound, and I think that they're after well, it's hard to say because people haven't watched them really closely out there with this ant. They might be after the brood chambers. They might be, I just don't know. They're not after the granaries, I'm sure about that. But they only do it in the fall, just September. And I thought, this is so weird. They must be doing other things during but the first few times I saw them flying up out of the brush, and I went over, what's there? Harvester ant mound, holes in it. It's a bad time of year because our bird hawks, the accipiters, come through at the same time. And on 2 occasions, I've seen flickers almost get picked off by Cooper's hawks because they're out there feeding in a really exposed place, right?
Like whatever's in there.
Yeah. Next. All right, so let's talk about this last little subject that I'm really actually, in some ways, most interested in. There's been a debate for years, but not a lot published, on how long do harvester ants actually live? How long do the colonies live? Because they're easy to see, and so people notice, hey, they're still around, right? So here's some studies. The consensus is about 20, 35 years for old ones. These are all lower elevation than ours here by quite a bit. And actually, the observation time on ours is a little longer than most of these. So let's, next. So one way to do it is to take advantage of remote sensing. So these are both aerial photographs. This one was in 1960. Our oldest one for that area is quality enough is 1948. And I'll show you that. 76, and what you can do is do the grids, scale them, rotate them, get them lined up, and if the grids look the same, they're basically in the same places, and these are basically identical, right? And the blue things here are all colonies that are still in existence, and they still have colonies there, right? So I can go out there, and all these things are there right now in 2026, right? So if you look at this, The difference between these two photographs is like 16 years, not much. I add 10, and why do I do that? Because I know that it takes a minimum of 10 years before a colony will be developed enough to actually be visible, right, in an aerial photograph or satellite. So plus 10, that's a conservative thing. So if we do that, 26 years here, and if we go all the way to the recent year, still there, 75 years. Okay, next. This one is from the oldest photograph, but there are dozens of these, and I'm just showing you one because I happen to like this colony, and it's right out in front of our cabin, right? Here it is in 1948, right there, if you can see that, right? Here it is today. Here it is, like last week. And you scale it and rotate it, and then the trees are the key markers, right? And the reason there's a little offset on some of these is because when I marked the original ones, there was no canopy. So you can tell exactly where the center is. Once the canopy gets there, it screws it up. So, but anyway, it's trivial, right? It's the same colony, and it was already there for more than a decade in 1948. Still there. Next. So how do we account for long-term site persistence? Two models. One is the colony lives a really long time, and it's continuous occupation. And the other is, okay, they might live a long time, but they do die, and then they get recolonized, right? Then they get a newly mated queen comes along and says, oh, that looks like a good spot. Yeah, and it's also got gravel. That's great. So those are the two models, right? How to get around that, and that's hard. So next slide. Oh, so I have measured recolonization for the last 30 some odd years, but this is data only from the south half. Well, it has most of the colonies, so it's preliminary. But it's not much. And when I expand it, I already know that when I expand it to the whole study site, it's going to drop to 10% or less. So that doesn't seem high enough to account for dozens and dozens of colonies that were there before 1948 are still there now. Yeah?
What markers do you look for to know that it's been recolonized?
What?
Like, how do you know it's been recolonized? How can you tell?
How do I know?
Yeah.
What?
Like, I mean...
How do you know it's been recolonized?
How do you know it's, like, not the same?
Been
Like, do you have, like...
Hold on. So here, all right, so I haven't explained to you the model.
Okay.
Yeah. So you saw earlier on when I was talking about fire.
Yeah.
I said they need fires because they're hemmed in by shrubs. And the shrubs grow really well around that nutrient-rich area. So they actually have to defend that site in order to keep brush from coming in. And you can see it on aerial photographs. Colony dies, stuff moves in. Can't see it anymore.
Oh, and then it starts getting...
Yeah. So what you do is you basically, well, it's the next one.
Okay.
I'm getting ahead of myself, you guys. Stop that. Yeah, you start dating. You start dating around the edges there with older sagebrush, right, that have been basically kept from coming in. The site's been defended. And some of these date to the 1920s, some date earlier than that, right? So we're talking about a long period of time and evidence that they've actually been either continuously or nearly so, right, occupied that whole time. Next slide.
I have one question.
All right.
Okay, so obviously there is the repopulation. Like when they come out, they mate and they find new hives. What about within the colony? How does a hive just pass on to the next generation?
So I haven't quite gotten there, but
Okay,
we're almost there, right? You guys are just getting ahead, right? All right, so a classic way to approach this, and what's been done by other people, is to actually monitor them for a long period of time. Ours has been monitored longer than any of the others, and we have bigger sample size. So there's a simple kind of actuarial model, right, which predicts the maximum potential lifespan. So if I take in the southern part of the thing where most of our colonies are, and I do that model with all the colonies, this is what I get, 3/4 of a century. Okay, but, and this is not looking at dead things or anything, this is actually monitoring ongoing real life colonies and finding out the rate at which they die, right? But if I take away the colonies that were killed by flooding, which is a climate change issue, because we've started to get really serious monsoons, and they've brought down debris dams that have fanned out the things, and they've basically washed over and killed a lot of old colonies, recent times. We're really interested in the long-term trend here, and that is basically an age-independent mortality. All colonies are killed by flooding. It doesn't matter whether they're young or older, in between, they all killed. So if you take those out, which seems reasonable to me, then you end up with this. Basically 94 years, right? Okay, next. So here's how they die. I mean, there's very little data in the literature on what kills colonies, old colonies, but we have it. Floods are the main one, but that's a fairly new phenomenon. So if you eliminate that, this is the next one, which I call winter or diapause. So they don't go into hibernation, they go into diapause, but they go down on the ground when it's cold, and they stay there for months. And the most common way those colonies die is they look fine. They go down on the ground for the winter. No one ever comes out. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of insects killed in a short period of time. Nobody comes out. So I think it's a case where pathogens, they're all stuck together. They crowd up together in those chambers underneath the ground. They're so cold that they don't groom one another anymore. They're sitting there just waiting for bacteria or some other pathogen to zap them. So no one's ever excavated, don't know. Hard to excavate on our site because it's got so damn many rocks. Really hard. So I don't know. But that is the main killer beyond floods. Then we get excessive shading, like the trees and so forth. That kills them slowly, but it kills them by basically declining their reproduction because their nurseries are too cold. And then finally, there's an exotic one, which has never been reported, and that's elk wallows. So we're high enough, we get a lot of elk. And elks in normal places, the rutting males in the fall will often find little basins that are moist or wet or something or other, and they get in there and they roll around and they pee in there and crap and roll in it and perfume themselves. But in our place, we have no surface water. So they pick big anthills and they roll in them and they just completely destroy them. Just a big basin, right? And it doesn't kill the colony directly, but it wipes out all the resources that they have for the spring, because there are no seeds in the spring. So really, yeah, we've lost some colonies, 2 or 3, to elk. So the last thing is here, is that possible? And this is what so E.O. Wilson, all the rest of the serious people, right? This is the script, right? Yeah. Colony has only a single queen for the lifetime of the colony. Workers there's been some experimental work on this, I don't think it's great. Colonies will not accept, if you run an experiment, try to give them a replacement queen, they kill her. They don't want a replacement. So therefore, it means that if you know colony age, you know queen age. So I've been telling you that there are some serious numbers associated with these colonies, right? So the question is, could you really imagine an 80-year-old insect, which would be the oldest in the world, by the way, and thinking about what, is there anything about harvester ants that would sort of lend them to be in a special case where you might expect really long lifespans? And I'd say, yes, there are. And then there's the question if you could get hold of them, which is not the easiest thing in the world, but from an old colony that you think's old, and actually age her. Can that be done? And the answer is maybe. Yeah, maybe, right? Yeah. So I wanted to say just a few things. I'm looking at my clock here. I'm almost out of time, but I'll just say it here. If you take your people out to see the ant colonies, if it's in the hot part of the day, they won't be out, and so there's no problem. But they're more interesting when they are out. So a couple of things you need to keep in mind. They sting. They sting, and the literature says this is an aggressive ant. And that's not my experience. I've been around these ants for 30 years, and I've been stung a total of 4 times. And it was always my fault. They always climbed up my pants, and I wasn't aware of it. I sat down on them, right? And then you do notice it, because this is the most potent venom of any arthropod. Yeah, and it's designed especially for mammals, but mice. They don't like those mice going after the granaries, right? So they've been selected for a venom that has been tweaked to be really potent on mammals. Yeah, and which is different from wasps. Yeah.
Stung from the front or the back? Like a wasp, do they have a reverse sting, or is it from the pinchers in the mouth? Where the ant stings? Because they are related to wasps.
So they bite readily, but they're so small. It's nothing.
Yeah.
It's just nothing, right?
Yeah.
The stings are different.
Yeah.
The good news is the quantity of venom is so small in an individual worker that, yeah, it'll swell up immediately. They burn and they itch, and the welt will last for a week or 2. So you don't want to get a bunch of them. And the thing you have to worry about is whether you have any clients who have a history of extreme reactions to Hymenoptera stings. So bees, wasps, right? Same group as these ants, actually. So those people could be bothered. But what it will tell you is you can walk up to the colony, and you should do it slowly. And don't stop on the ground, because they're very sensitive to vibration. And then you can stand there, and all you really have to do is glance down. And if you have shorts on, you can feel the ants crawling up, but they usually don't come up anyway. They're just exploring.
Yeah.
They're not trying to attack you, and you can just flip them off, right? If they get inside your pants and you don't know it, that's a different deal. The other thing is you never, ever, ever want to screw around with the mound. No, that's the third rail, right? They will defend that mound and everything in it to the death. And so, yeah, don't do that. But you can do the little experiment with the card and the shade, right? Yeah, just don't mess with the mound. That's all. Yeah. So I think that's all I have to say. Yeah, questions?
So I feel like I've had to have stepped on one of these mounds at some point.
You did?
I'm sure.
Oh, you're thinking you will?
No, I'm not planning to, especially now. But I'm just wondering, like, or a cow or a deer, like something steps on these mounds.
They do.
And they just rebuild?
They do rebuild, so it's a total priority for them. They drop everything else immediately. If you damage the mound, and it happens sometimes accidentally, the very first order of business. It's got to be during the day, though, right? They don't work at night. Yeah, those are the rules. But yeah, no, they go right after that.
Okay.
They
1 ant per rock?
huh?
It's still 1 ant per rock? They go when they rebuild?
Oh, that's a great question. So I don't know. I've never actually. That's good. That's a good point. Yeah, maybe they get desperate and say, "Hey, yeah, no, we need to get this. We need to get this done, right? Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah."
So other animals eat lots of grasses and plants and then pass the seeds. Will they harvest or take the seeds from the animal droppings and that pass through? No,
I've never. My guess is there isn't a lot of nutrition in some of that stuff, but no, I've never seen them go after cow patties or other things. No, it's seeds that have fallen to the ground, so they're usually ripe, right? Yeah, I've never seen. I think a couple of other species, I've seen notes where it said they occasionally will ascend a plant to try to pull stuff up, but no, these guys, they wander around and they pick stuff up on the ground. Yeah.
Is there anything about the plants that are in that secondary ring, that's the higher nutritionary ring, that they drop seed faster than the ones that are?
Well, so I've wondered about that myself. So I didn't mention this, although I labeled it there sort of indirectly in one of my slides. One way of telling you've got a really old colony is it will be ringed by old Indian ricegrass. So Indian ricegrass, it turns out, is an incredibly, under favorable condition, incredibly long-lived thing. So the interesting thing is that Indian ricegrass on the upper portion of our property, it's too It's too mesic, and the soil is not what they really like. They like kind of sandy soil that's well-drained and warm. And that's exactly what the ants create around the margins of their thing. And when you go away from there are no rice grass. All of our colonies on the upper of rice grass long term, they're all associated with harvester ants. Yeah.
Farmers and harvesters.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, one other question. So they remind me of bees.
Yeah.
And I'm very fascinated by the way that the queens are formed in bee colonies. Where do these, if there's one queen for 80 years,
Yeah.
they just didn't give birth to any queens, or is one?
She gives birth to virgin queens. So those winged things that fly off are queens potentially, but they haven't been mated.
Okay, and then they would go form a different colony.
They would.
And
Yes.
only, but 98% of them die.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. There's almost no survival of those. So it's one of these things, and there are a lot of different species of animals that do this. They just sort of flood the zone with just enormous amounts of offspring, but with very little individual attention to any of them, and it's just a numbers game. Yeah. And if you live for 80 years, you actually only need to replace yourself. You only need to hit the jackpot like 1 or 2 times, right? Yeah, I mean, you got plenty of time, really, right? So the trick is to get through the first 5 years. And what I didn't show you there, because I was skipping over it, is I showed a photograph of a recently recolonized site. So they're not very common. It was a big old one. It died, and after about 6 years, it was recolonized. And the mound that young colony built was like about 5 times what you normally expect. And the reason is, in large part, the gravel. The gravel's all there. It's a lag deposit. Unless the thing is really hammered mechanically or it's a flood washes everything away, I can go out and find, just by virtue of the concentrated, very distinct gravel, I can find sites that are more than half a century old. They were never recolonized, grown over by sage, but there they were, right? Yeah. So you wonder why it is that they don't, because the evidence is they ignore. The newly mated queens fly right over, and they steadfastly ignore these newly dead colonies. Yeah. And it's probably because it's just too risky to go down and try to explore them.
And they're fertile for all 80 years? This queen is fertile her entire life?
What?
Is the queen fertile for her entire life?
Well, that's a great question. So I thought originally the way to test the age might be in a coarse way was to look at their sperm load. So they start with a lot, but they don't get any more. So it has to last them a lifetime. And every single worker and every would-be queen has to be fertilized. The egg has to be fertilized by a sperm. So that's one sperm for all the workers, and they probably replace 5,000 workers a year.
Okay.
So you need at least a minimum of 5,000 viable sperm a year. But what does that turn out to be in 100 years? 500,000. It's nothing. So we know that they actually have, if they mate with several males, there's really clever experiments to figure this out. But in any event, they come away and start with well over 1 million sperm. How good they are at keeping those things viable for 100 years, nobody knows. That's another issue. But they have, in theory, enough sperm to go on well over 100 years. Yeah, sorry. It's just true. I told you, they're really interesting animals, right? A lot more interesting than you would think.
Any interaction between sites? Like,
yeah.
Do they interact with each other?
Yeah, they all have territories. That's why they're spaced out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
it's
they're never close to one another because, in fact, it's too dangerous. So any newly mated queen that makes a mistake of landing in the territory, they're roughly circular, will be killed immediately, right? Yeah. No. It's a tough life. It's a tough place, and they are really successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So one day of an orgy lasts 100 years.
Yeah, that's right. It's an orgy for the century. That's right. Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like this might be life-changing because now I know there's one of these in my backyard, and now I know what I'm going to go look at.
Well, I have pet colonies, right, that I really like.
I've got my own. This is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they don't come indoors. They like the sun. They need the sun. No, they never come indoors. Yeah, they're not like a lot of other ants. They're not going to be that. But you don't want to disturb them. That's a problem, right? Yeah, you don't want to accidentally disturb them. Yeah, but I've had almost no trouble with them. As I said, I've only been stung 4 times. Yeah.
Well, now I know why my mother recommended that I had to hear this lecture. It says a lot about my mom.
Yeah.
And it also, it's pretty amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're
That's
welcome.
amazing.